Well, now we've gone through many of the basic conditioning exercises, and we've examined various elements of an action. Now we're going to actually perform actions. These are the first preparatory actions which are silent. I've given each one of you an action so that you had a moment to think about it. Normally in class, I would give you the action. You maybe have 5 minutes to build your situation. So in our type of improv, it's not the same as comedy improv or theater games, which are wonderful for spontaneity. What Stanislavski established was you need to train the actor to be able to sketch an improvisation so that it paralleled what happens in the play. Because in the play, we study the circumstances. So you're going to build circumstances according to the structure of dramatic action. An action must have a beginning, a development, which we call the middle, and a logical conclusion, which we call the end. Because drama does, beginning, middle, and end. Your action, it must be in justified silence. Like when you open up a scene on stage and there's a whole list of things the character is doing before they start to speak. That's what this is. So these silent improvisations need only be a minute or two long. Like I say, like a bathing suit, right? Long enough to cover the subject, but short enough to be interesting and reveal it at the same time. Okay. Now, in addition, you must see images. So you need to select personal images and build an imaginary situation, which will give you imaginary images. It's always the two together. It can be based on your own life experience. Bring your life to the stage. Don't worry about emotions. Just build your circumstances. Who, what, when, where, why. Let how take care of itself while you're doing it. Think of how to do it while you're doing it. Don't think of, well, then I'm going to tiptoe this way, and then I'm going to show explanation. No. That will be phony. Just think of, I come here to do such and such, and I'm going to take this step, and that step. When you get in the situation, work from the scratch in the situation, as if in life. You go one at a time, and I will give you critique based on the elements that are there that you got, the elements of human behavior, and mention an element or two that you might have consider for the next improvisation. Because we often don't get all of them to start with. And it doesn't do you any good for me to sit here and give 10 minutes of notes on an improv, because you can't, the human being cannot absorb that many and change it all right away. We have to build that muscle. And so I want to encourage you by giving you just where to go next. So if I don't mention something, that's the reason. It's not because we may not have seen it, it's because I'm guiding you to where to go next. So now we're going to apply everything we've done before to the fulfillment of a purposeful action on stage. Silent actions are primarily physical, and you have to build the psychological side of it, the circumstances. Verbal actions are primarily psychological, and you have to choose the physical behavior to fulfill them, as well as the circumstances. In this case, I've given you physical actions. Belinda, yours is?
It is to come to tell a friend some very important and good news, but then they're not home.
And so what do? Don't figure it out beforehand. It's going to be improvised. Has to have a beginning, middle, and logical conclusion. You have a physical obstacle. Your friend is not at home. Every improvisation you do has to have a physical and or psychological obstacle. What is your action?
My action is that I find an object that I treat as a treasure or an antique, special meaning to myself.
Okay, beautifully. And you're going to treat an object which isn't that, but you're going to find the behavior which is typical for that. Because on stage, we don't have to believe we're really at Elsinore. Right. Or that, we go nuts if we try to do that. You mustn't believe you're Hamlet, but you may believe in the circumstances, in the actions of Hamlet, and in his purpose. That's what makes it believable. So to treat your partners as other people, to treat the set, to treat the prop, to treat the props as. This is what to treat as. It's about caridad.
My action is to tell a family member their stay has been denied.
Okay, so in that case, we call it the 11th hour, and you have 3 people, 1 in jail, and 2 of you come to tell them the result of their stay of execution, whether it's going to happen or not. And the person, and then you improvise. It's all in silence, but justified, but you may speak 1 time each, and you can only say, I love you. But you can interpret that through subtext and subtext of the body any way you wish, depending on your circumstances. Jan, what is yours?
Mine is to treat a chair as a vicious dog.
Good. So that's a physical obstacle, isn't it?
Yes.
And you have to struggle with an obstacle. And yours, Michelle?
Mine is to treat a pillow as a cat.
To treat a pillow as a cat. Now, every situation has to have an obstacle and a sharp, clear, interesting adaptation. Using wed gag when you make decisions. Everybody understand? Wonder, evaluation, decision, gesture, action, gesture. Okay, and I'll give you critique to let you know what was there and what isn't. But I may not mention everything, I'll just give you direction. Okay, Melinda, would you like to go first?
Sure.
Good, why don't the rest of you just come down here and sit in front? Thank you very much. Would you go back on stage? Thank you very much. Was it clear?
Yes.
Where was she?
Outside of a friend's house or something.
Outside of a friend's house. She was outside. It wasn't a hallway in an apartment building or a condo? Or was it?
I thought it was outside because she was looking through a window.
Okay, good. So your behavior has to be fitting and typical so that we understand the circumstances. So that gave us that information.
Mm-hmm.
Was it important news?
Something urgent.
Yeah.
Very urgent.
Very, very urgent. Was it good news?
Yeah, I know that was the thing.
I think so. I think she was disappointed because she wasn't going to be able to share it with this person.
But if I hadn't said it was good news beforehand, would you have known?
I thought it started out as good news, and then I got a little confused by the news.
That's how I felt. I thought at first it was good news, and then at the end I thought it was really, really bad.
I thought that she was just really frustrated that the friend wasn't there and she couldn't relay this information, that this good news that she wanted to tell her friend.
Okay. Yeah, that was not quite clear what the good news was until you pulled out the paper. And then we could see it was very, very, very important to you. What was the good news?
Well, the good news was going to include this person, and it was something that was immediate.
Yeah, that had to happen right now.
So it was an important meeting.
Did you have an image for this person, someone you really know?
Yeah. So it was invited to an important meeting with the producer, and but he was only going to see us right now, and for 5 minutes or never again. So I couldn't get the person.
Would it have to be both of you?
Yeah. So I decided to leave the note, but I walked away knowing that I wasn't going to be able to do it. but I was pissed off that they weren't there, so I just decided to rub it in by leaving the note, like, look what you missed.
Oh.
But I could see why, yeah, my mood changed quickly about the good news, because I was frustrated, because I knew the good news would not continue to be good news.
Thank you. You need to work on developing an adaptation. And how we do that is, an adaptation is an adjustment you make as the character to an obstacle. An adjustment is the adjustment you make to your partners on stage to an obstacle, like when somebody forgets their line or they change the blocking, you have to make an adjustment. But an adaptation is you in the circumstances. And an adaptation needs to be sharp, clear, and interesting. It should have a strong change of tempo rhythm and strong gestures that really, and time to develop. You need to struggle with the obstacle. So you needed to, I would say, think about that and think how you might have sustained the anticipation of good news before making such an abrupt change.
So basically, because I feel like I made an adaptation.
You did.
But you're saying the initial good news was not sustained.
Yeah, what it is you dropped your purpose.
I dropped my initial purpose.
Yeah, it was like the obstacle immediately frustrated you. So then that's why we got confused and weren't sure how good the news was.
Okay.
Or that it was good news. You understand? It's like you gave in too quickly.
Right.
You let your emotion take you over.
Right.
And your frustration came up, which is all right. But then you could struggle with that and try to get the good news back, you know, and your purpose and try even another thing. So struggle with an obstacle.
Okay.
That makes it interesting.
Right.
Good. And think about the underlying reason for that in yourself. Okay, let's give John our attention, please. Huh.
That's it.
Okay, good. Thank you, John. Was that clear? Stay there. Was that clear? Yeah. It was clear. What he was treating it as was very clear. Golf club. No. Come on, don't be so serious. Tennis racket, right?
Baseball bat.
Huh? Baseball bat, right. So that was good. What wasn't clear was where you were coming from and why you were here. I mean, you're walking down the street and suddenly you see, how will we know it's an antique or what it meant to you? I could read that in your thoughts a little bit, like it was your father's or your grandfather's tennis racket. But I didn't know where you were. Where were you?
I was in this cosmic land where there's only clouds around me.
Were you really?
You know, I think it became that actually. Originally, I was thinking of being in a place, like I was at home,
Yeah.
looking through some old stuff, and then later on I made it into a store. But actually, when I came out here, it just became this kind of surreal space.
Well, you see that then vague images in your, or surreal images in your mind bring out surreal and vague behaviors. You must, art, Stanislavski said, the enemy of art is generality. So always be specific. Yeah. So, however, it doesn't mean that you can't eventually do surreal things, or it could be in heaven, you know. But usually we do that in movies because movies can show everything.
Right.
But excuse me.
Specific.
Right now, you need to train your instrument to project every thought and every phrase of an action. So you could have probably come from where?
The last thing I was thinking of was up in a street, just walking into a store, and I saw an old antique tennis racket.
Okay, then we needed to know this was a store, first of all.
Right.
Now, what could have happened in the street that brings you in here?
Look in the window, I see something.
Okay. And why would you be looking in the window?
Just shopping, window shopping.
Okay, let's be more specific. What is the weather like outside?
It's drizzling, maybe.
Great. So maybe you're getting wet and you come in here to get out of the rain. You look in the window, you see something, and then why would it be lying on the floor?
Well, it wouldn't be. It would be in a rack, but
And you needed to use a chair and treat it as a rack. This is great. This is why I asked you here. Because some of these people have, gone through this training before and other people haven't. They have a different experience. So but what we want to do is create a lifelike scenario and a lifelike situation and then execute it improvisationally.
Right.
So it's specific. So basically, this would have worked then. But what if wouldn't there be other objects in the room too
Yeah.
to look at?
Sure.
So you may have put a couple other things just to examine, and then you come across this.
Okay.
Then we have comparison and contrast. Contrast and comparison is used in literature, it's used in dramatic writing, and it's used in acting.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And that would then make it clear. Oh, then you might really realize, maybe this is a bargain story. Like I sold at my garage sale. It was after my mother died and I was depressed and I don't know what I was doing. And I sold my antique tennis racket that now is worth a fortune because it was like, initialed by, some early 1950s tennis player whose name I don't even remember. And it was catgut and it was a Spalding and it was top of the line. And I wish I had it now. I could still use it. I can't get around the tennis court as easily, but I can still use it. So there's a story behind this tennis racket,
Right.
which you need to break. See all the details you could bring for next time?
Yeah.
And you don't have to do what I'm suggesting. These are just possibilities.
I was hesitant because you said something that don't plan it out when you tell Melinda. You said don't plan it out. And so I didn't want to plan too much because then I would have planned out what to do.
I said, don't think how to do it.
Right, you
Think
have to set
of
up
what you're doing.
circumstances.
But I could see why you'd be confused because I didn't make it real clear.
Yeah.
What you would need to do is choose an objective
Right.
and think of steps, physical steps.
To get
but
there.
then when you get on stage, that's when you figure out how to do the steps.
Right.
But you do have to have a through line of action.
Right.
Okay.
To create the environment. and everything.
Yeah, exactly. Very good. Okay, who's next?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Why do we do these improvisations other than to put together everything that we do in exercises? Anybody know?
So that we can see how our body reacts in particular situations and bring that to something where there's an actual script.
Yes. The whole point is to explore how to do this with a script. So then we take a script, we say, well, what's my action? Well, it's to say goodbye to a place. Let me get up and do an improvisation. What is this called? When we analyze a play on our feet.
Active analysis.
Active analysis. And active analysis is how we work on building a play and a character together, right? Okay, let's now give our attention to Jess. Thank you, Jess. Come back. How was that? Was it clear? We never ask was it good or was it bad or I liked it or didn't like it, because who cares? You know, what we want to know is how much technique does he have and is it clear? Can he project? Okay, so where was this place?
Maybe an apartment?
And possibly someplace he's lived. Yeah, this was a home of some kind, wasn't it? This was not a place he worked, for instance, necessarily. It could have been, but we took it as your home. When was it?
The last day he was gonna be there.
Was it in the morning or the evening?
Evening.
That's the sense that I got too.
Evening?
More of the evening kind of thing.
I had the sense it was around 10 or 11 o'clock or 4 or 5 o'clock, but I wasn't quite sure. That could have been more specific. One of the things that'll help you is if you use other props. You don't need a lot, but like if it's cold out, put a jacket on. You might, if it's evening, you might turn out the lights. Not the real ones, of course, because then we wouldn't be able to see anything. But you understand?
Yeah.
So that would help. We do all these things in life and we don't think about them when we're acting.
I
Yeah.
got the sense he was going to catch a plane or something like that.
Yes. Where do you think? Yes, I agree. He was going to catch a
And he's
plane.
optimistic.
Did he check his tickets?
No, but he was packing his bag.
He was in a rush.
He was in a rush. He thought he was missing.
Did you have your tickets?
I was going to check that once I got to the car, but
That would have been a good thing to choose here, just to make sure you didn't leave them someplace.
yeah, absolutely.
That would be typical and fitting, wouldn't it? Yeah. But I think you were right. That's exactly right. Where was this? Was this when you were leaving home for the first time?
This is when I was leaving Mill Valley, California. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon.
Okay, so it was between 4 and 5.
The movers had just left. They had taken too long. I was late and going to catch a plane to New York.
Okay. Well, I didn't want you to tell us too much because if you have to tell the situation, then you failed in expressing it. But those are good circumstances and they're real and concrete based on real images, which you had, right? You fulfilled the action with a final gesture, which was very touching. You touched the wall. And that's what we're looking for, to fulfill the action with a final gesture. Because basically that's what you need to do from scene to scene. A scene begins with a thought and action and ends with one. And the story's told in between. Thank you. Who's next? Okay. Okay, good. Jan, I did that because I thought what you're doing was very good, but it does help to really have something to react to.
It's hard.
Yeah, but you did a very good job. I thought your initial reaction to the dog was perfect. And also throwing the book at it. Yeah. So did you see a vicious dog there while he was reacting to it?
I
first.
Yeah, at first. Then, but I think it threw it off when you stepped out of frame.
Yeah. Well, it's because you're afraid of the conflict, I guess.
Yes.
And you back away.
Well, you would be further away in real life.
Yeah.
That brings up a very, very interesting element. Is the stage real?
No.
What is it?
It's an artificial environment.
It's an artificial environment. That's why we have to be trained to behave organically on it, because the human instrument does not know how to respond to an artificial environment other than artificially. The human instrument is always responding truthfully to the environment, and the environment's artificial, so we behave artificially. But through conditioned reflex, we can eventually behave organically in an artificial environment, which is basically insanity. Right? It's insanity. See, so this is very artificial, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you're here, and you have to stand too close to it so that you're in frame or on stage. So what it is there's stage truth and there's life's truth. And the same is true in a movie too, right? I mean, they can't provide everything just as it would really happen in life. You have to use your imagination and justify that gap and close it that way.
Yeah.
It was very good. I thought your adaptation was good because you tried lots of different things
Yeah.
to overcome the obstacle. You struggled with it.
Yeah.
Did you have a comment?
No, just that I enjoy being here.
Good. You know who Yeppy Hodorf is, don't you?
Yes.
Thank you. Good. That was very clear, don't you think? And very expressive. Now, Michelle, sit there for a moment. Where was she?
In like a bedroom, home.
She was home? And was it under the couch?
Yeah,
It was under the couch. You didn't
Behind
know that
the
at
couch.
first. You weren't
No.
sure. You just thought maybe.
it's calling them out.
Now, here Michelle chose a good purpose. The objective was to give the cat medicine. Was your objective to get to class or rehearsal or something?
It was school.
Okay. So objectives are very important and they have physical aims. Yours was you had to pick up the cat to give him the medicine. And the obstacles were many. The not finding the cat, the having to crawl on your knees is an adaptation to it, of course. And then the biting. So then you decided to poison the cat so they wouldn't bite you anymore?
So that was his little medicine.
Huh? It was
That
little
was his
medicine.
medicine,
Okay,
right.
of course I'm just being facetious. Okay, any comment? Did you have images?
Yes, I did.
Did an image of a cat come to our mind through the course of the physical treatment? That's the whole idea. You don't have to force yourself to believe a pillow is a cat. That's insane. But if you treat it believably, belief will arise. So it's through the fulfillment of our physical actions, truthfully, that brings about truth on stage, belief. What is the other form of truth on stage? It's the living of truthful emotions. So if you're forcing your emotions, or you're only using your emotional memory and only thinking of your own personal experiences and not as the character, then Stanislavski sees that as a certain level of representational art, but not the school of living experience, because the truth is the character's experience. You bring yourself to the character, not the character to you. Okay, very nice, thank you. And we have one more. Thank you, that was beautiful. Don't you think? It was I was very moved by it. Was it clear? Yeah, it was very clear. Okay, good, you're all crying. Good, sit down there, I'm glad. Huh? It gives me shivers. Yeah, very good. So, is it possible to stir emotions through actions without dwelling for an hour on them before you go on stage? It is, isn't it? Isn't it the proof? Class, what do you think were the psychological circumstances in their relationships? Go ahead, Melinda.
The couple was definitely like, of course, sorry that he was there going to die, but at the same time, I sensed a big disappointment too. Like they're both just angry at him still or something. Or angry that he was going to be executed.
What do you think?
I was going to say that they seem to be
Hold on a second, guys, Scott. If you guys are going to talk to Philip, you should be sitting up front.
Okay.
We can't get any of you.
Yeah. I noticed that too, but I didn't want to stop and say, everybody come here. But I should have. I could.
Mindy, can you sit on the floor, please? The chair.
Because it blocks the camera.
Actually, yeah, thank you.
Okay. How much more time we have? 5?
8 minutes.
Okay. Okay, good. Well, this was really very moving, very touching. I was moved by it. Was it clear where they were at and what was going on?
Mm-hmm.
I want to say before I forget it, the main purpose of this exercise is to start us working in communion, because we are watching one another's eyes, we have a sensitivity to one another's bodies now at this point, and also to show us, to teach us that words must be needed on stage. You mustn't just talk off the top of your head. And that every word in a script, even a dumb script, has to be the most important thing that character is saying right now, or it wouldn't be written. Does that make sense? Okay. What do you think was the relationship, let's start with that, between Caridad and John? Anybody venture to say? Michelle?
Were they like brother and sister?
No,
No,
but we were, I'm sorry,
I was going to say. Go ahead.
I mean, we had a family relationship. Should I go ahead and just say what?
No, not too much. I thought you were husband and wife. And I thought that he was a brother-in-law to you. That's what I thought. But I wasn't sure what the relationship was. Anybody else have a good guesstimate?
I thought they were brothers.
You thought they were brothers? Okay, that's very possible. But Caridad was not married to John? No. Okay. What do you think, Jan?
I thought she was married
To Jess. So you were brothers and she was your wife. And whatever, okay, then, okay, go ahead.
He said I love you to her and not to both of them.
It's interesting. And there was a point where I picked up on an image, and that was that he killed your child at some point. Oh, sister.
Who he was having an affair with.
Oh, I don't want to know too much. You know why I don't want you to tell us too much? Because I want these people to really learn how to use their intuition and observance. You know, it's psychic, really. You know, Dr. Carnegie told me, Sharon told me that when she observed the Moscow Art Theater in Russia, that the actors were using psychic transference and not calling it that because it was the time of the Soviet era. But it was what Stanislavski actually taught. I mean, they were walking one behind and standing one behind another, and the person behind was sending a thought to the person in front through the back of their head. And when they got the image, they would go into the action, she said, and they all got it right. That's how sensitive we need to be to one another on stage. You know that. See, so even when you're observing, you have to be that observant to really trust your own impulses. Even now, look back, what impulses do you have further? Is there anything that you'd want to share with this situation, with them?
Well, you could tell they were upset at him. That's
Upset?
yeah.
Yeah, you really could see that they had, definitely, did you stir your own images? And you brought out your own experiences. But yet, did you think of them beforehand, or did they just come up?
I thought of them beforehand.
Okay, that's all right.
I had an 11th hour situation in my life.
Okay, so
Not like this, but something.
analogous. Did you?
No, I did not.
But it just came up in the moment. And did you?
I did not. It was huge for me just looking at them. 'Cause they both
Good.
looked full when I got there. When I turned around and saw them, I thought,
So here's the proof. I want to make an adjustment to the way I trained some of you when you were working with me at the TheatreLab. I really pressed personal images a lot and told you about imaginary images, and certainly we worked on them. But my friend from Yale went to the Yale Drama School that also, for a time anyway, taught Stanislavski. I guess they still do, but more like this. And what I learned from my colleagues in London was that, and of course it's in Stanislavski's own writing because I went back and double checked it. If you have the association, great. If you don't, you have to make the imaginary images, treat them as if they're real, to treat as. Both can be just as powerful, especially when you're in communion. And that's the amalgamation. Sometimes you will have the experience to call up, and sometimes you won't. And you have to just create it through your imagination. But both are as powerful when you're in communion with your partners. Because by relying on one another, you infect one another with the creative state, which is itself the prelude to inspiration. Yes, Caridad.
Oh, I just wanted to say that as far as my own personal experience, I went through it in my mind beforehand. I discussed it with John. But by the time I entered the room, I wasn't thinking about that at all. I was thinking directly about this situation and the images that pertain to this
Good.
specific situation.
And that's as it should be. You should be focused on the imaginary situation because that's what has to come to life. We only borrow from the past to bring its energy through the body, pranayama, control of muscular energy, life force, and then everything is created scenically in the moment.
1 minute.
I'm really glad that you're saying this because I do believe that I was taught a different way. You did push to to make it real stuff, not emotional recall per se, but to make it the images in your head real. And I always was really reluctant to make them up. Okay, I've never been in that situation, but I've been in this one, so I can make it close. But when in actuality, I know myself well enough to know I can imagine that and get there and have the same result.
If nothing else, I want this DVD textbook and all of you who participate in it and its series that come to understand that the system is you. It's you're the creative entity here. And you must always be searching for the truth, searching to improve, and willing to change. Stanislavski was, Vakhtangov was, Sonia changed until the last 6 months of her life. She was evolving the technique. It's a living system, and so are you. And I want to keep changing and improving.
As far as imaginary images are concerned, I think what you really utilize then is your sense of sympathy and connection with the world. Like when you watch the news and you empathize with the
Empathy,
pain that someone
exactly.
is going through, because you see yourself in that experience, and you're connected to their experience, and that's how I think you use imaginary images on stage. I think it's through our empathy with other people that we can utilize imaginary images on stage.
I agree. It's like when we read a novel and we get all wrapped up in it and we cry or we see a movie. Those images are actually being transferred to us in the space. We're identifying with it. And actors need to develop a high degree of empathy. Caridad, that's a very good point to make. When I was in college, they gave us tests from the psychology department to check empathy, and they did each of the departments in the university. And the theater department had the highest scores in empathy and empathetic behavior. And they came back and told us that. It's very interesting. Well, thank you all very much. It was really great.